Now I'm very excited to turn to our next panel. Please join me in welcoming Grace Young, who's a James Beard Award-winning cookbook author, food historian, Chinatown advocate, and a recipient of the Julia Child Award, and one of my favorite people. Nice to see you. Moderating this conversation is a good friend of Food Tank, Stacey Vanek Smith, the senior story editor and co-host of the podcast Everybody's Business at Bloomberg. Give her a round of applause. Thank you. Nice to see you. Thank you.
Hello, thank you, Grace. Thank you for talking with me. I want to jump right in to your philosophy around eating and cooking. And from what I know, it very much stems to the way you grew up eating. Can you talk a little bit about what family meals were like and how that shaped your cooking and your eating?
Of course. Thank you so much. So I grew up in a very traditional Cantonese American household. I grew up in San Francisco. Much of our lives was very American, but when it came to the food, my parents basically raised us with exactly the same diet that they had in China. And they were constantly telling us at every meal why what we were eating was good for us. And so the concept of food as medicine was taught to me from the time I was a child. When we would have really rich meals, we'd be eating in restaurants, or we had dim sum. Then the next day, my mother would make very plain Chinese rice porridge, and she would say, "This is very good for cleansing your system." The porridge is just cooked long grain rice and water until it's a very thin gruel. When I was a teenager, she had me often drink American ginseng. When you're a teenager, you're very, you love junk food or French fries, burgers, that kind of thing. And lots of times as a teenager, you would have acne. And the American ginseng, cleans your system and balances you. Every night at dinner, the dishes were always like a balance between a stir-fry dish and a steamed dish and rice. And there would always be a soup. And the soup was drunk for its ability to balance your body. Very clean, very simple soups. So this time of the year, my mother and my aunties always make a mustard green and sweet potato soup. Very simple. No meat in it at all, but the feeling is that at the change of the seasons, going from summer to autumn, it's a time that your body is very vulnerable to getting sick. And so this balances your body, fortifies it. That combination of vegetables cleanses your body, and my aunties and my grandmother and my mother would all say it prevents you from having the flu.
Oh. Well,
Yeah.
I would trust them.
Yeah. And also, like Chinese herbs. Women always would drink after their menstrual cycle dong quai, which is in English is called angelica. And so they would make a soup of angelica and Chinese red dates, and that fortifies your reproductive system. It would also be drunk after you've had a baby. My mother often put goji berries, which are nowadays in American society considered a superfood, and they're put in trail mixes. We never had it raw. It was always put into soups or stews, and we were told that was very, very good for your eyes.
When you were growing up, when you were a teenager, how did you feel about eating in this way? Was it later that you developed an appreciation for it, or did you always have that?
I hated it. I was just like, why do we have to drink these soups? Like every meal was a soup, and this soup did this, and this soup did that. But now my parents have passed away, and my first book is called Wisdom of the Chinese Kitchen, and it talks about the wisdom behind all of the dishes that we ate and why we ate them. And I actually now refer to the book sometimes, because sometimes my memory isn't so great, right? But I thought a few years ago that as my parents aged, they were always drinking once a week Korean ginseng. They would make a soup of Korean ginseng, and the thought is that as you age, you're not as strong as you used to be, and you need a little bit more energy, and you need to like sort of strengthen your heart. And so recently I started drinking Korean ginseng, and I actually feel very good.
Really?
Yeah,
You
I
noticed
mean,
it?
I seriously, there is so much wisdom behind Chinese cuisine. Yeah, and that's why the book is called The Wisdom of the Chinese Kitchen.
One of the things you talk about a lot is seasonal eating.
Yes.
Will you talk a little bit about that and its importance, I guess, both for an individual and the world around us?
Right. Actually, I can feel that my throat is getting a little dry. Can anyone get me a water?
Water.
Just in anticipation. So seasonal and local eating is, for the Chinese, what you eat and the season that you eat it is one of the fundamental tenets of Chinese cuisine. My parents always ate what was in season and anticipated, thank you so much, Danny, would anticipate with excitement that, right now in the Chinese markets, lotus root is really coming into season. And that is drunk in the autumn and in the winter to increase your blood and improve your circulation. That's not something that you would eat in the summertime. In the spring, my mother's face would light up because asparagus was in season. But if you gave her asparagus, around November or December, she would look at you like you're crazy and insane because it doesn't taste as good, right? It's woody. It doesn't have great asparagus flavor. It's not the time to be eating asparagus. And so my parents were also very frugal, and whatever was in season was the cheapest vegetable to buy, right? So, and when you think about it in terms of climate change, it's so important to eat what's local. It means that there's been less intense refrigeration, less travel time. When I walk into Trader Joe's and I see all those vegetables already wrapped up in cellophane, I always think, my mother would just think, how insane, why would anybody buy vegetables that you don't get to choose yourself? In Chinatown, she would go and, hand pick each green bean. And I would stand there just like really impatiently, like, why can't you just grab a whole bunch? But the art of buying your vegetables is to go to the farmer's market. And I'm the same way. My husband's like rolling his eyes, but I'm just, I go to each stand, oh, this one has the really good plums. And I don't just grab a bunch of them. I'm looking at each one and I put it in the bag and I think, I am channeling my mother.
A lot of hearing you talk about food, it seems like the ideas of food and storytelling are very woven together. Will you talk a little bit about that? I mean, storytelling is my world, and so I'm very interested in it, but it does seem like it ties quite into your world as well.
Well, I think food becomes much more exciting when you tell the story behind it. I'm called the stir-fry guru and the wok queen.
And the wok therapist.
And the wok therapist,
Yeah.
yes. So I love stir-frying. And I often talk about how wonderful it is, how delicious it is, what a great cooking technique it is. But when I went to China and I saw people stir-frying on traditional hearth stoves. So in China, they have stoves that have been made of clay. There's a hole, and that's where the wok sits in. And then they either put dried rice stalks or dried grass stalks into the stove, and then they heat up the wok and then do their stir-fry. When I was in the countryside and I saw a farmer do this, it completely blew my mind because they put in the dried rice stalk, it stir-fried, the vegetables stir-fried in 2 or 3 minutes. And then I looked into the stove and there wasn't even a quarter of an inch of the rice stalk. So when people are really accustomed to stir frying, they know exactly how much fuel to use. And it made me realize that in the West, when we cook, we're not thinking about conserving our cooking fuel, right? We braise a stew for 2 or 3 hours. We put something in the oven that roasts for 3, 4 hours. And we're not thinking about conserving fuel at all. But there, I just thought, wow, and stir frying it only takes 2 or 3 minutes. The most amazing story to me, which I think really teaches you something about the Chinese reverence and respect for our resources, is my mentor was Florence Lin. And when she was in her 90s, she told me this story that when she was a teenager in China, she lived in the countryside with her aunties and her mother, and she said that they only stir-fried every fortnight because stir-frying, which only takes 2 or 3 minutes, was such an extravagant use of cooking fuel. Instead, every night for their dinner, they would cook rice in a giant wok, and after they had boiled off the majority of water, they would put a rack over the rice, and then they would put a dish with a raw fish and scallions and ginger. They might put some tofu, a dish with some beaten eggs to make a custard, a dish that had pickled vegetables, a dish that had fresh vegetables like bok choy or green beans. And then they would put the lid on the wok and finish cooking the rice. And by the time the rice was cooked, all these other dishes were cooked, so that you didn't have to use cooking fuel for every single dish that you were cooking. And I think that when you do storytelling and you explain to people the reasoning behind the way things are done, you have a respect. It really teaches us something. And I think right now, as I was preparing for this program with you today, I was thinking about food as medicine, but I was also thinking we need to speak about the fact that the Chinese principles behind our cuisine really teach us about living sustainably. And as we face climate change, this becomes more and more important.
Well, I want to ask you about the wok. You are known as the wok therapist. Yeah. You wrote a cookbook, The Breath of a Wok. I've watched many of your videos, and I have to say, they almost seem like a love letter to the wok. You speak about it almost like a person, like a living thing. And I'm very embarrassed to say I've never cooked with a wok. And I have pans that I like them, but I don't think about them when I'm not using them. But this seems so fundamental to your work. And I'd love for you to talk about the wok. People call you with questions about their wok. They're stressed about their wok. They think they seasoned it wrong.
Yes.
They want to find someone to season it.
Yeah. You should watch I have a video on YouTube called The Wok Therapist, and that talks about the fact that no one calls me because I don't give out my number, but people certainly text me and they send me messages on Instagram and Facebook, and in the old days on Twitter. Yeah, I have this love affair with the wok from the time I was a child. And that is because my father was a liquor salesman in San Francisco's Chinatown, and so he knew all the chefs, because all the chefs were the owners. And so whenever we went into a restaurant, we never ordered from the menu. He would just stroll into the kitchen, talk to the chef, and then he would come out and he would say, I asked the chef to make, my father's favorite dish was stir-fried clams with black bean sauce. And he would say, I told the chef to give us extra wok hei. So wok, all of you, your Cantonese is very good. You know what wok means. And hei is the Cantonese word for energy and life force. In Mandarin, it's qi, right? And so if a stir fry is made properly, it contains wok hei, which I translate as the breath of a wok. And so when the dish would come out, we would sit closest to the kitchen door, and literally you could see the heat coming off this dish. And I always say it's like a barbecue, like when you take food right off the barbecue, it has a special essence when it comes off. And 5 minutes later, it still tastes good, but it's lost that essence. And so, yeah, I grew up with this love and appreciation for wok cooking.
What is it about the wok that does give life to food? I'm so curious. I have to ask because seems like such a big part of your cooking and your...
Yes, so when you cook with a traditional wok, it's either carbon steel or cast iron, and the more you cook with it, any of you who grew up with cast iron pans, it acquires a patina, so it becomes naturally nonstick. And I think this is, right now, this country, this world doesn't need nonstick cookware. This is, to me, what I call ancient nonstick cookware. And the food tastes better. It really has a sear and an intense flavor. And when you talk about food as medicine, when you're cooking from carbon steel or cast iron, the heat actually transfers iron into your food. So it's a brilliant way of cooking. I see Dr. Nessa was in the audience, and when I wrote my last book, I interviewed her talking about stir frying and what are the health benefits, and she confirmed that the high heat and quick cooking actually preserves some of the most delicate vitamins like C and folic acid. So the genius behind this way of cooking cannot be denied. And you need to get a walk, and I'll go to Chinatown with you. Yes, I'm offering my services.
I will take you up on that. I will 100% take you up on that. I'm very excited. Before we go, I wanted to see if people want to start to change the way they eat and maybe start to consider some of the things that you've been talking about, food as medicine, more seasonal eating. What are some good places they can start? What would you recommend to somebody who is maybe wanting to make these changes but doesn't quite know where to begin?
Well, I think one of the most brilliant aspects of Chinese cooking is the emphasis on vegetables, legumes, and grains. And we certainly eat meat and fish, but it's always eaten really as a condiment. It's not like in the West where each person gets a whole chicken breast, right? When you do a chicken, right? Or a whole steak. When you're eating in a traditional Chinese home, there's a mixture of dishes, and if there is meat protein, it's like thin slices, maybe even shreds of pork or chicken or beef. I think that's so important, and especially as we address the effects of climate change, a reduction of eating meat is so important for reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
So more vegetables, maybe a bigger variety of vegetables.
And even eliminating meat, I think, would be a fantastic way to start.
Oh, wow. Anything else you might recommend to people who, are here and care about food and care about the world?
Well, I'm also...
Other than buying a wok?
I'm also known as a Chinatown, the accidental voice of Chinatown. And so I would urge everyone here in New York City that they should go to Chinatown and support mom and pop businesses and those eateries. And those, thank you. Those markets, I think we're all trying to stretch our dollars right now. Food is so expensive, and one of the great hidden secrets is to shop in Chinatown where the quality is so high and the prices are so low because Chinese customers are very, very frugal. And so you can find everything in Chinatown, and the fruits and vegetables are generally local. They're coming from nearby farms. And this is a great way to eat local and to support struggling mom and pop businesses, because our Chinatown right now is at risk of disappearing. And certainly the policies right now of our government and not supporting immigrant businesses means it's more important than ever for everyone to show up.
Thank you so much, Grace and Stacey. I'm going to go get a walk with you, too.
Yes, please.
Give her another round of applause, please. Thank you. Thank you so much. Joining us for this next conversation, Stacey.